We beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, members of the Cabinet, ex-officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All these we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Administration of oaths or affirmations?
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements?
None.
Presentation of petitions?
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports?
Recognize the Honourable Minister responsible.
Financial statements of the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company Limited, 30th of June 2014, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
I recognize the Honourable Premier if you do a motion for it to be put down until the Minister is able to enter the chamber.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning.
Morning.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the item number 5.1, financial statements of the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company Limited, June 30, 2014, be deferred until later in the order of today's proceedings.
The question is that item number 5.1, as it appears in today's order paper, being financial statements of the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company Limited, June 30th, 2014, be deferred for later in today's order paper. All those in favor, please say aye. Against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, item 5.1 is deferred until a later time on today's order paper. Madam Clerk.
National Cultural and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Home Affairs, Health and Culture.
Recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House a copy of Cayman's very first National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak to his report?
Just briefly, Madam Speaker, to read the foreword which I have written with respect to the policy. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to present the National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017-2026. This document is informed by existing instruments, strategies, and policies which comprise culture and heritage components, including the Cayman Islands Constitution, Vision 2008, and national, regional, and national policies. In developing this policy and strategic plan, we had many discussions with a cross-section of individuals and representatives from cultural entities, including the Cayman Maritime Heritage Foundation, Cayman Catboat Club, Cayman National Cultural Foundation, the National Trust, National Museum, and National Gallery. I was thoroughly pleased with the interest and enthusiasm of those who served on the Cabinet-appointed steering committee and appreciate the results of their undertakings, which are vital to preserving our heritage and further developing our culture. The Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan will assist when making decisions such as resource allocation for things such as educational and social programs. Areas of focus included land-based heritage, maritime heritage, legal and governance aspects, literary arts and oral history, visual arts, crafts and creative industries, and performing arts and festivals. While it is important to remember heritage and history, we must remember that our culture is a dynamic thing, constantly evolving, reflecting the inclusion of new people and new influences. Cayman, over the past 50 years in particular, has seen massive amounts of people from all over the world come to live and work in our country. When I was born, the population was 8,500 or thereabouts. Now it is more than 60,000 people. With that meteoric increase in population in a small country that now supports more than 130 different nationalities, it is easy to see the fluidity of culture as it paves the way for the future. We must recognize the vibrance of the Caymanian culture, realize how important it is to us as a people, and how significant it has always been to those who come here and truly want to understand what life is like in these Cayman Islands. As a jurisdiction, it is crucial to ensure that our younger generations are aware of and appreciate from whence we came. Indeed, our Constitution reminds us of the important role our history, culture, and heritage played in shaping our past and present, and will eventually shape our future. This is why the Minister of Culture believed it was important to address this long overdue need to develop a policy outlining our vision, goals, and aims for the culture and heritage sectors of the Cayman Islands. The policy and strategic plan is an expression of this government's belief that we need to adopt and implement a set of coherent principles and aims to foster, nurture, and support the cultural expression of the people of the Cayman Islands, preserve our heritage, and help grow our individual and collective knowledge of the arts and creative industries. Its success will contribute to the sustainable development of our islands and the social well-being of our communities. I appreciate the input and thank everyone who had a hand in making the National Culture and Heritage Policy and Strategic Plan for the Cayman Islands 2017 to 2026 a reality. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Government of the Cayman Islands, Cayman National Cultural Foundation, financial statements 30th of June 2015, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Premier, Minister of Home Affairs, Health and Culture.
Once again, recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the financial statements of the Cayman National Cultural Foundation for the year ending 30th of June 2015.
So ordered. Does Honorable Premier wish to lay it at this time and speak after?
Very briefly, Madam Speaker.
So ordered.
Madam Speaker, just to say that the Auditor General has found the following. In my opinion, the financial statements represent fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Foundation as at the 30th of June 2015 and of its financial performance and its cash flows for the year then ended according with international public sector accounting standards. The point being, Madam Speaker, this is another clean audit of a government entity.
Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Cayman Islands Government Annual Report for the year ended 30th of June 2016, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Members, is the same position. Is it the will of the House that the motion that was passed be inclusive of this, or would members wish to repeat another mundane motion to that effect? I see heads nodding on both sides. I take it that the motion the Premier previously passed would encapsulate all the matters for the Minister until he so arrives. No dissents? Okay. Madam Clerk, next item. Thank you.
Public Service Pension Board Annual Report, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
Recognize the Honourable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the Honourable House the annual report for the Public Service Pension Board 2016.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Deputy Governor wish to speak to the report?
Yes, Madam Speaker, just briefly. Thank you. Madam Speaker, the Public Service Pension Board also received an unqualified opinion, which, as the Premier alluded to earlier, is becoming the norm in the civil service and indeed the public service. Madam Speaker, some key financial information was of the PSPB. The net assets available for benefits as of 30th of June was 552.3 million. Net increase in net assets available for benefits ending in the 12-month period 30th of June was 40.9 million. Total contributions to the pension plan for the year ending 30th of June 2016 was 58.8 million. Total benefits paid to participants for the year ending 30th of June 2016 was 35.8 million. Investment income was 26.7 million. Operating income was 0.2 million. Operating and investment expense was 8.2 million. Actuarial present valuation of the accumulated plan benefits based on an actuarial valuation as of 1st of January 2014 is 624.2 million. And the fund deficit using assets of funds as of 30th of June 2016 being 624 million, and the actual valuation of the 1st of January 2014, CI 522 million, was actually 7 to 1.9 million. Madam Speaker, the Public Service Pension Board is this year celebrating its 25th anniversary. They have done a fine job in managing the Public Service Pension Fund, started from very humble beginnings and had grown into a dynamic organization which, as I said, is managing over $500 million assets. And Madam Speaker, it was noted that even though with a very volatile year in the investment markets, the Public Service Pension Board Fund still gained a good interest rate of over 5%. So, Madam Speaker, that shows that the investment strategies that have been deployed by the PSPB is strong, and I want to commend the Managing Director and her team, the Board of Directors, for all the great work that they're doing in managing what is our retirement fund. So, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
National Energy Policy 2017 to 2037, Cayman Islands, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for Works, Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I am going to lay the national energy policy on the table of this Honourable House. But I only have one copy, so before I actually hand it over to the Sergeant, I would ask that you would allow me to read a section before I hand it over.
Request permitted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the National Energy Policy of the Cayman Islands 2017 through 2037. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I am really happy today to announce that the Cabinet has approved the first national energy policy for the Cayman Islands, which contains bold national goals for renewable energy development and greenhouse gas emission reductions over the next 20 years through 2037. First of all, Madam Speaker, let me begin by acknowledging the excellent work of representatives from both the public and private sectors who have all made their invaluable contributions to drafting of this policy. Madam Speaker, the members of the Energy Policy Committee were Mr. J.P. Morgan, who acted as chairman, Mr. Charles Farrington, who acted as the secretary, Mr. Louis Boucher and Mr. Jason Abraham, who both acted as deputy secretaries, the fifth elected member for Georgetown, who was a very active member of the committee, Ms. Gina Ebanks Petrie. And Madam Speaker, I trust it would not be unparliamentary for me to name the fifth elected member, since there are so many of us elected members from Georgetown, to make sure that everybody understands that it is Mr. Winston Conley that I speak to. Ms. Maria Zingapan, Mr. Miguel Jakes, Mr. Robert Lewis, Mr. Alan Neeson, Mr. Richard Hugh, Mr. Jonathan Tibbetts, Mr. James Whitaker, Mr. Haroon Pandue, Mr. Matthew White, Mr. Duke Monroe, Mr. David Watler, Mr. Mark Griffith, Mr. Ian Tibbetts, Mr. Kenny Ryan, Mr. Tim Austin, Mr. Charles Brown, Mr. Sasha Tibbetts, and Mr. Derek Westerborg. Madam Speaker, those names will give clear indication from the level of stakeholders which were part of the committee and the various walks of life from which they came. We also, Madam Speaker, had contributions from outside of the committee, and while it takes up a few minutes, I believe that it's appropriate to mention, having mentioned the names of the makeup of the committee, to also mention where various contributions came from, so that everyone can have a good feel for how in-depth this whole process was in order to arrive at what I'm tabling today. We had contributions from Homer Energy. We had contributions from the Department of Children and Family Services, Department of Vehicle and Equipment Services, the Public Works Department, AMEC, Foster Wheeler Environmental and Infrastructure, UK Limited, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the acronym that most people know that organization as is ECLAC. We also had contributions from Daymark Energy Advisors and Blue Energy Alliance. So, Madam Speaker, the information gathering process was internal, external, countrywide, and outside of the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the enthusiasm, diligence, and perseverance which was displayed during this process has resulted in what can truly be described as a made-in-Cayman solution that is fit for purpose, utilizing lessons learned and best practices from other small island jurisdictions regionally and globally. I certainly would like also to acknowledge the then Electricity Regulatory Authority, which has now been subsumed by the Utility Regulation and Competition Office, which acted as the Secretariat, Madam Speaker, during the committee's deliberations over the past months. Madam Speaker, just before I introduce you to the key components and makeup of the NEP, or the National Energy Policy, please allow me to provide you with a brief history on how the policy has progressed to this point. You will be acutely aware, Madam Speaker, yourself, that the previous government had appointed a National Energy Policy Committee, which began its first work in August of 2010. The draft policy was tabled in the Legislative Assembly in March of 2013, just months prior to the last general election. However, the policy was not officially adopted as government policy. And Madam Speaker, after that, several things happened. There was a historic climate change agreement made in Paris in December of 2015. There was a major reset to lower global oil prices that is currently benefiting local fuel and electricity consumers. And also there were significant scientific advances in renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies, making those technologies more mainstream and price competitive. And in response to these major global shifts, the government decided a review of national energy policy was warranted. Madam Speaker, let me just interject here, because I am not one to play games. While I was the minister responsible, still am the minister responsible, and I was trying to juggle all of the various priorities that we had. There were others outside and inside who were prodding and probing along to make sure that this did not lay dormant for an extended period of time. And I remember specifically as we started to get going, I think everybody sensed that it was time, and I remember the 5th elected member from Georgetown bringing a private member's motion, which thankfully didn't put me to where I was flat-footed, but simply spurred the process along. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, in response to these major global shifts, the ministry appointed a National Energy Policy Review Committee, which undertook reviewing and updating the original draft policy, which was created in 2013. So we weren't starting from scratch. Madam Speaker, the work from that review committee has resulted in the Cabinet-approved policy, which is before you today. And I'll take this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to hand a copy of this policy to the Sergeant so that it can physically be laid on the table. And I believe members already have copies of this policy. Thank you. Madam Speaker, it is my hope, and if I am bold enough to say my expectation, that this legislature will unanimously approve this policy so that it can be on record as the national energy policy of the Cayman Islands, accepted by not only the Cabinet, but by all elected members of the Legislative Assembly. The National Energy Policy, Madam Speaker, is meant to act as a guide towards excuse me, greater sustainable energy supply and consumption in the Cayman Islands, and in so doing, identify specific actions in the following sectors. And those sectors are electricity, fuels and fuel products, transportation, land use and buildings, water and wastewater, public education, and the environment. So those sectors, Madam Speaker, give us a fair idea of how thorough this review has been. I want to note that due to significant scientific advances in alternative technologies, such as renewable energy, equipment, electric vehicles, and energy-efficient technologies, which has led and is continuing to lead to increased cost competitiveness against traditional technologies. The policy before us today is much more aspirational in its aims and ambitious in its scope than the draft tabled in the Legislative Assembly in March 2013. And of course, Madam Speaker, that is to be expected because that's 4 years ago. Madam Speaker, I also want to interject here. I haven't had the opportunity really to seek agreement from colleagues, but I certainly want to advise everyone that I am going to see what the possibility is of us encouraging more electric vehicles being brought to the island by way of lowering the duties that are charged on such vehicles at present to give some advantage to those types of vehicles being used more. Madam Speaker, the policy's vision, which is enhancing and embracing a sustainable lifestyle through responsible and innovative energy supply and consumption, reflects the aspirational nature of the policy as we seek to position the Cayman Islands as a leader amongst small island states in the development and application of renewable energy as our primary energy source. The vision articulates the national energy policy in the broadest of terms, and it accentuates clearly to all stakeholders that any energy development over the 20-year policy timeline must meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Madam Speaker, the policy's focus on sustainability regarding energy aligns with the greater long-term goals of the Cayman economy, which are GDP growth, rising Caymanian employment, and growing visitor numbers that is due to greater cost competitiveness. The policy's 4 goals, once successfully achieved over the life of the policy, will assure the realization of the policy's vision. And Madam Speaker, with your indulgence, I just wish to name the 4 goals.
Please proceed.
Goal number 1 is to, thank you, Madam Speaker, forgive me. Goal number 1 is to increase knowledge and education with respect to energy use and sustainable energy solutions, focusing primarily on school curricula and public education with the intent of assisting the public in making better informed energy choices. Goal number 2 aims to make the Cayman Islands a destination of excellence for energy development, emphasizing well-researched, innovative, environmentally sensitive, and sustainable energy development to keep services affordable for local consumers, which benefits key factors in the economy which are competitive regionally and globally, such as financial services, property development, and tourism. The 3rd goal, Madam Speaker, addresses energy security. With our island's energy needs almost 100% reliant on imported fossil fuels, the Cayman Islands are vulnerable to global market price volatility and product supply disruptions. Also, living in a hurricane zone requires a modern energy infrastructure that is innovatively designed and is resilient and safe. The 4th goal aims at greater socio-economic and environmental sustainability. Given our sea level topography on all 3 islands, the threat of climate change is real and potentially detrimental to key sectors of our economy. The policy also sets out 2 aspirational, yet, in my view, very attainable targets. The first target is current total electricity generation from renewable energy in the Cayman Islands is less than 1%, Madam Speaker. That's what it is today. However, given significant scientific advancement in alternative technologies, the policy is targeting 70% of total electricity generation in the Cayman Islands from renewable energy by 2037. Sounds kind of high, but with all of the technological advances that we're seeing today, we believe that it is very possible to achieve that target. The second target, Madam Speaker, in total, the Cayman Islands are but a nominal contributor to greenhouse gas emissions compared to industrial countries. And one could fairly say today that we are not in any way obligated to emissions reductions under the Paris Climate Change Agreement. However, Madam Speaker, that being said, the policy aims to lead by reducing 2014 Cayman Islands greenhouse gas emissions of 12.3 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per capita to meet the UK's greenhouse gas emissions reduction target of 4.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per capita by 2030. Madam Speaker, the modeling, which is based on industry best practices, indicates that both of these targets are attainable. However, it is our hope that these two targets will not only be met, but will be surpassed by the deadline years that have been given. I've been advised that the modeling was in some areas conservative, as the intent has been to phase the build-out of renewables based on known developments. But I believe that it is possible with higher than modeled rates of penetration from distributed renewable energy, alternative fuels, and electric vehicles, the target can be surpassed. So we then say, Madam Speaker, how do we implement this? The implementation of this policy is so critical to the economic growth of the Cayman Islands that, Madam Speaker, we can't afford to allow it to become another document on the bookshelves. It is therefore set out in some detail the strategy to assure its implementation and continuous review. And in adopting the policy, this Legislative Assembly will also be approving the implementation, the monitoring, and the review strategy. The ministry responsible for energy in future, from here on in, will have primary responsibility for overseeing the policy's implementation. And Madam Speaker, once we can achieve the other legislative amendments that are on our agenda this time to really make ERCO be up, running, and with all of the components put together, along with the energy policy, Madam Speaker, I believe there is a good future to look forward to in the Cayman Islands, and there will be a framework which will be in place, which is not only workable, but I believe will bring advantages to our people. Madam Speaker, an implementation plan developed by the Review Committee has accompanied the policy, and it identifies responsible stakeholders such as government departments, statutory authorities, utilities, and other stakeholder groups to establish timelines and to develop performance indicators for measuring the policy's progress. Once the implementation has begun, the policy will need to be monitored and periodically evaluated to ensure it is on track to meet the renewable energy penetration and greenhouse gas emission targets. Madam Speaker, The strategic aims, which are the actions that have been identified to secure success, cover the ambit of the sectors that I mentioned earlier, where electricity has 10 strategic aims varying from increased consumer awareness to specific actions by the Utility Regulation and Competition Office aimed at increasing energy security via innovation and renewable energy penetration. Fuels and fuel products have 5 strategic aims, which vary from sustainable handling, storage and disposal of fuels and fuel products, to consideration towards lower carbon fuels in the energy mix. Transportation, Madam Speaker, has 7 strategic aims, varying from the promotion of healthy lifestyle changes, example, walking and biking, to a shift to more fuel-efficient vehicles, including electric vehicles. Land use and buildings has 8 strategic aims, promoting zoning practices to encourage sustainable energy practices and greater facilitation for renewable energy development. Water and wastewater, Madam Speaker, have 3 strategic aims, which promote public awareness on the relationship between water consumption and supply and energy demand, as well as the protection of ground resources. Education has a single strategic aim meant to develop and adopt a comprehensive public education plan, raising awareness of the policy and its progress. The environment, Madam Speaker, has 2 strategic aims meant to lower greenhouse gas emissions in the Cayman Islands. Further, it should be noted that all strategic aims in the policy encourage strong environmental performance. The draft implementation plan, Madam Speaker, is attached as a companion document for the information of members. To oversee this next stage of policy progress, the National Energy Policy requires for Cabinet to appoint an Energy Policy Council comprised of 9 to 12 members from critical stakeholder groups from both the public and private sectors. The Energy Policy Council will monitor, review, and evaluate policy performance and identify any mechanisms for change to keep the policy on track. Madam Speaker, the success of the policy will depend on the appointment of a permanent secretariat to coordinate and manage the day-to-day responsibilities of implementation and to support the Energy Policy Council. Madam Speaker, I am of the view, although I don't profess to know it all, but I am of the view that the establishment of ERCO makes such a secretariat easier to happen. To do so effectively and efficiently, the policy requires that the Energy Policy Council develop a monitoring plan. The Council is also charged with conducting periodic reviews of the policy's strategic actions and targets at intervals of between 4 and 5 years. And Madam Speaker, I'm nearly there, but let me just pause for a second. We can look at other policies, and because there is no specific, maybe I'm not saying it the right way, but because there is no body whose sole duty, that's perhaps the best way to say it, but because there is nobody whose sole duty is to monitor and ensure that these reviews take place, is why we have several laws on the books today which require reviews and just have not been done because of so many other priority areas. And once it's in a general pot where you have to deal with priorities, inevitably on many occasions, such reviews get left behind. Mindful of that is why a secretariat has been suggested. The other thing I want to say, Madam Speaker, is, and you know me, Madam Speaker, this exercise, while I was not part of the committee, I have kept abreast, for obvious reasons, of what has been going on, and I have been briefed quite regularly about the progress. And Madam Speaker, I know that I am not the only one, but I certainly will admit that I am one of them who has been involved in this process, who didn't really fully, and I don't profess even today to fully grasp what this is all about, what leaving this alone can be a reality in years to come for our people. And I also recognize, Madam Speaker, that we can't simply depend on the ordinary citizens of the country to be acutely aware of all of these things and to fall in line with best practice. We have to make sure that we educate them, that they understand before crisis what we all need to do as a way of life, which doesn't change. We still can do all the things that we want to do. We just have to do them in a more conscientious and pointed way in order to achieve the goals that I spoke to. So, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, I want to remind everyone how firmly affixed energy is within the fabric of our daily lives, no matter what age or what gender we are. It is my hope that this House will embrace this national energy policy, which calls for a sustainable approach to energy usage and development. Madam Speaker, under the guidelines of this policy, clean energy infrastructure, innovation, education, and workforce development shall be promoted on all three islands. And I certainly anticipate downward movement in the cost of energy to all of our consumers. All of this will impact the socio-economic interests of all our Caymanians and residents alike in a positive way, both today and in the future. And Madam Speaker, having had a short discussion with you, I would wish to not just lay this energy policy on the table as a policy that was accepted by the Cabinet of the Cayman Islands, but certainly I believe that this legislature needs to send a message to the entire country that this is important, and I would hope that there is some way that we could, by some method, show, hopefully, that all members are in support and recognize this as a national country policy and the national energy policy of the entire Cayman Islands.
Honorable Minister of Planning, under 24(9)(h), a motion can be moved without notice arising of any item of business made immediately after that item is disposed of and before the next item is entered into. So
Madam Speaker, if I am understanding you correctly, I have finished my laying on the table, and before you introduce the next item, under Standing Order 24(9)(h), I believe is what I heard you say, I would move that this legislature accept the national energy policy as one that is a national energy policy accepted by the entire membership of this legislative assembly by way of the usual aye on your ask. Don't know if I said that the right way, Madam Speaker. Sorry? Madam Speaker, I have to clarify that there is absolutely, in my view, no need to debate, and I would simply ask for a show of hands, and I think you will have to guide regarding that, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to prolong anything with it, but I just believe that this is important enough for all members to have an opportunity to simply indicate their support by way of your question.
if I could seek the will of the House, the Honourable Minister responsible for infrastructure has moved that the Legislative Assembly accept the national energy policy as a national energy policy accepted by the entire membership of the Legislative Assembly by putting the question of acceptance on this particular national energy policy. The will of the House comes in that in normal circumstances, a motion provides members with the opportunity to debate and a member to close. As the member who moved the motion added in his short presentation, that was not his intention. Obviously, neither the chair or the minister can prevent that, but he's asking for members, if they so wish, to exercise a discretion because of the nature of the national energy policy. So if perhaps the chair could have an indication before we move forward from the leader of the opposition or the independent members, I would take it that it's consensus on the government side. Recognized member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, whilst procedurally that is correct, that he has now moved the motion, in my view, and it would, debate would ensue thereafter by whomever wishes to do so. It is somewhat premature on our part, because on the minister's part, in that he wishes for us to debate this motion when we only recently received the energy policy. So in voting, in debating or voting on this policy, we would be, I guess, Madam Speaker, trusting that this policy is something that we can all agree with. I certainly, with my experiences in the energy sector, I certainly do not want to question the authenticity or the abilities of the many people that the minister has said here this morning that was consulted, and thus I don't want to question the abilities of those many people who were there. But he must understand that the rest of us have not received this in a timely manner where we could digest it, so to speak, and make willing, worthwhile contribution there too. So I'm sure we will. I think the member from Northside asked him if he wanted him to move the motion initially to accept it, but we will support it with the caveat that we have not received it in sufficient time to digest it.
Can the member from Easton clarify for the chair whether or not you've had sufficient time to read it? Because you put emphasis on receiving it.
Well, that is by extension, Madam Speaker, that is what I'm alluding to, which is we only received this 1 week ago, and certainly when you receive something as technical, it requires as much technical research as that, then you would expect that we would have more time. But Madam Speaker, for once, maybe we can trust the minister. Most people will know I like trust but verify, but and I do that my own research based on my own experiences and knowledge in the field. But I know there were people there, and yes, there are some, based on what the minister said and my brief look at it, there are some ambitious goals in there. I hope they will be achieved.
I think I caught the eye of the third elected member from West Bay.
Madam Speaker, having worked very closely with the fifth elected member from Georgetown and Mr. James Whitaker, and those names were mentioned that they were in this board to help set this up. So I too will agree with what the member from East End said, ma'am.
Out of the abundance of caution, let me make sure every member had an opportunity. Does any other member wish to lend their support or objection before I put the question? I recognize the fifth elected member from Georgetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise to support the motion made by the minister. I mean, obviously, I've been on the committee and had a lot of time with the other members he mentioned, so I'm happy with its contents. But again, I'm only one member, but I do support the sentiment of the minister, and just wanted to echo that the fourth elected member from West Bay and the member third from West Bay and the member from East End also accompanied me to London and Trinidad at various times, and representing the Parliamentary Association, and had a number of discussions about the contents over time. So I just want to acknowledge their work and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and our Parliamentary Association as well in the process. And just to also point out, Madam Speaker, that I think you were also instrumental in the last administration to bringing this forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
No one else have caught my eye, so I'll call an honourable minister responsible for infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, lest there be any misunderstanding, I was not trying to catch anyone by surprise. I was not trying to spring any trap. I truly believe that this national energy policy is perhaps one of the most important pieces of work that this 2013-14 legislature could have accomplished, along with whatever else. And I was simply asking for a way to allow all of the members to be able to be recognized as supportive and accepted as the national energy policy, so that all of the other things that need to fall in line can be done with confidence that this is something that everyone wants to happen. Thank you.
The question is that the Legislative Assembly accept this national energy policy as the Cayman Islands national energy policy. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Believe the ayes have it.
Can we have a division, Madam Secretary?
Most certainly. Madam Clerk, please call a division.
Honorable Alden McLaughlin.
Aye.
Honorable Moses Kirkconnell.
Aye.
Honorable Kurt Tibbetts. Aye. Honorable Osmond Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Wayne Panton.
Aye.
Honorable Marco Archer.
Aye.
Honorable Tara Rivers.
Aye.
Mr. Roy McTaggart.
Aye.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Aye.
Honorable McKeeva Bush. Mr. Barney Bush.
Aye.
Captain Eugene Ebanks.
Aye.
Mr. Alva Suku.
Aye.
Mr. Winston Conley.
Aye.
Mr. Ezra Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Orden McLean.
Aye.
Mr. Anthony Eden.
The results of the division are as follows. 16 ayes, 1 absentee. The motion is carried.
Government of the Cayman Islands, Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure, audited financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2015, 2017 to 2037 Cayman Islands, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
Recognize Honorable Minister for Planning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure annual financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2015.
So ordered. Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak further?
Very briefly, Madam Speaker, just to quote the Auditor General's opinion. And she says, in my opinion, the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure as at June 30th, 2015, and its financial performance and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with international public sector accounting standards. And Madam Speaker, I take that to mean that this is an unqualified opinion which has been given on this report. Thank you.
Government of the Cayman Islands, Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture and Housing and Infrastructure Annual Report 2015 to 2016, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
Honourable Minister for Infrastructure.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report of the Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure for the fiscal year 2015-16.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak to the report?
Madam Speaker, the report is fairly extensive, and I would invite members to peruse that report to get a pretty good picture of the activities of the ministry for the 15-16 year. Thank you.
Financial statements of Cayman Islands National Insurance Company Limited, 30th of June 2014, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, firstly, my apologies. I was trying to get some work done in the office. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2013-14 audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, Synico.
So ordered. Does the Minister of Finance wish to speak to the report?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just briefly. Madam Speaker, the audited financial statements of Synico for the financial year ended 30th of June 2014 shows that Synico ended the year with total assets of 31.5 million Cayman Islands dollars, total liabilities of 13.9 million Cayman Islands dollars, a net worth of $17.6 million, and cash equivalents of $16.3 million. During the 2013-14 financial year, Synico earned CI 63.6 million in total revenue and incurred expenses totaling CI $59 million. There was a resulting operating surplus of CI 4.6 million for the year ended June 30th, 2014. And Madam Speaker, the Auditor General issued an unqualified audit opinion on the 2013-14 financial statements of Synico. And Madam Speaker, an unqualified opinion means that the information contained in the financial statements can be relied upon.
Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, Cayman Islands Government Annual Report for the year ended 30th of June 2016, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Honourable Minister for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House, in accordance with Section 44 of the Public Management and Finance Law, the annual report for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development for the year ending 30th of June 2016, which also contains the audited financial statements for the ministry. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak to this report?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the annual report that has just been tabled consists of two broad sections. Madam Speaker, the first 56 pages is in respect of management information that the ministry believes members of the Legislative Assembly and the public will find informative. And the last 24 pages of the report are in respect of the audited financial statements. With respect to the information from the annual report, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development is organized into four main agencies, those being Finance Administration, the Customs Department, the Economics and Statistics Office, and the Treasury Department. The ministry is responsible for the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, or Synico as it's commonly called, and it also has administrative responsibility for the Central Tenders Committee, or CTC. The ministry's responsibilities include the direct management of its four main agencies that I've just mentioned. It provides an advisory management function for central government's financial affairs, which impacts all ministries, portfolios, and offices that make up the government. The Ministry of Finance does not have a direct management role with respect to statutory authorities and government companies, or SAGCs as they are commonly called. However, it does provide accounting and financial advice to SAGCs. The ministry also has the important responsibility of preparing an annual budget and financial statements for central government and collating the budgets and financial statements of SAGCs into the annual budget documentation and financial statements presented to the Legislative Assembly, thereby establishing the expected financial performance and subsequently reporting on the actual financial performance of the entire public sector for any given financial year. In terms of governance, page 9 of the annual report indicates those laws, regulations, and orders that impact the activities of the Ministry of Finance and its underlying agencies. These main laws and responsibilities include the Public Management and Finance Law, financial regulations, the Statistics Law, the Customs Law, the Customs Tariff Law, Customs Regulations, and Customs Orders. Information with respect to the staff employed within the ministry is provided on page 12 and 14 of the annual report. As of the 30th of June 2016, there were 211 full-time staff employed within the ministry, which represents approximately 6% of the civil service. Madam Speaker, the ministry is proud of the professionalism, qualifications, diversity, and the community spirit of its employees. And Madam Speaker, of the 211 staff members just mentioned, 54 of those staff members have achieved bachelor's degrees or higher and also possess professional qualifications. Of the 54, 7 of them have MBAs or Masters in Business Administration. Another 6, Madam Speaker, with respect to professional accounting qualifications, 6 of them are certified public accountants or professional accountants, or CPAs as it's commonly called. 3 of them are associates of the certified chartered accountants. 1 is a certified management accountant. 1 is a fellow of the certified accountants. And 1 is a fellow of the certified chartered accountants. There is 1 chartered financial analyst, or what is commonly called a CFA, and there are 2 attorneys at law. Of the total 211 full-time staff employed with the ministry as of the 30th of June 2016, 195, or 92%, were Caymanian, and 16 of those, and the remaining 16, or 8%, were non-Caymanian. In terms of gender, Madam Speaker, 54% are female and 46% are male. Madam Speaker, the annual report at pages 26 and 27 shows the ministry's key events that have occurred during the 2015-16 fiscal year, which ended the 30th of June 2016. Some of these key events include: in July 2014, the ministry indicated that the government no longer needed an overdraft facility. Madam Speaker, on page 26 of the annual report indicates that the government's overdraft facility was no longer required effective July 2015. Madam Speaker, for a correction, that should read July 2014. In August 2015, Mr. Charles Clifford became the Collector of Customs. Mr. Matthew Tibbetts was appointed the Accountant General in the Treasury Department in September 2015. In November 2015, the Ministry tabled its 2014-15 financial statements in the Legislative Assembly, and those financial statements received a clean or unqualified audit opinion from the Auditor General. In December 2015, import duty concessions on building materials and concessions encouraging development on Cayman Brac were continued. Also in December 2015, Moody's maintained its robust AA3 rating of the Cayman Islands. In June 2015, the decision was taken that starting in January 2016, duty on diesel imported by CUC for electricity generation would be decreased by a further 25 cents per imperial gallon. And in June 2016, Finance Committee concluded its review of the 2016-17 budget and approved the budget, Madam Speaker. On page 28 of the annual report, it's shown a letter dated the 18th of February 2016, received from the United Kingdom's Foreign and Commonwealth Office, or the FCO as it is commonly referred to, which indicated that it was satisfied that the Cayman Islands government was comfortably on course to maintain compliance with the cash reserve ratio requirement to the 30th of June 2016. The letter also acknowledged that the Cayman Islands government had achieved compliance with the net debt ratio. Madam Speaker, the 30th of June 2016 financial year ended with the government being in full compliance with all of the principles of responsible financial management contained in the Public Management and Finance Law. Madam Speaker, those principles have been recently repeated by the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility, commonly referred to as the FFR. On page 31 of the annual report, there is a letter dated 25th of May 2016, also from the FCO, which acknowledges that the government's 2015-16 budget was successful and it was in full compliance with the agreed limits established in the FFR. Madam Speaker, a key objective of the Ministry of Finance has been to restore public finances in a sustainable manner, to maintain public finances on its improved trajectory, and to restore confidence in the governance of the country. To illustrate this, on page 39 of the annual report, the table shows the increase in government's cash balances and a consistent reduction to debt balances over 6 financial years from the 30th of June 2011 to the 30th of June 2016 inclusive. Government's cash balances as at the 30th of June 2011 totaled $184.7 million, and at the 30th of June 2016, cash balances was $407.9 million. As at the 30th of June 2011, central government's debt balance was $625.2 million, and by consistent repayment of debt, at the 30th of June 2016, the debt balance had been reduced to $503.3 million. It is worth noting that government has not incurred any external borrowings since its term started in late May 2013, and its overdraft facility was cancelled in July 2014. Madam Speaker, pages 42 and 43 of the annual report shows the improvement in government's principle of responsible financial management from the 30th of June 2012 financial year to full compliance with all the principles for the very first time since the implementation of the law in 2004 with respect to the financial year ended 30th of June 2016. Another key objective of the Ministry of Finance has been to provide prudent fiscal management of government's finances. Steps taken by the Ministry to achieve this objective are detailed on pages 44 to 46 of the annual report. And Madam Speaker, these steps include: number one, amending the Public Management and Finance Law to effect a new financial year. The financial year has been changed to a calendar year basis. The first year for which this change takes effect is the financial year that begins on the 1st of January 2018. Starting the financial year on the 1st of January will permit more timely decision-making with respect to expenditures based on revenue performance in the first quarter of the financial year. Number two, the Ministry completed deliberations which led to the passage of the Procurement Law 2016, which is expected to reduce costs for government and the entire public sector and to enhance transparency in the tendering process. And number three, the Ministry provides oversight for the Central Tenders Committee, which coordinates, processes, scrutinizes competitive tenders for government contracts in excess of $250,000 to ensure government and the entire public sector receive the best quality and competitive prices for all purchases greater than 250,000 Cayman Islands dollars. An employee of the Ministry is the Deputy Chair of the Central Tenders Committee. Brief details of the Central Tenders Committee's work during the year are as follows. The number of meetings held were 30. The number of contracts awarded were 22. The total value of contracts awarded was $71.9 million, and the contracts awarded, and of the contracts awarded, 58 million were in respect of construction contracts, Madam Speaker. Another key objective of the government, led by the Ministry of Finance, is the facilitating of economic growth. Page 47 of the annual report indicates: 1. Positive real GDP growth in the last 4 years and projections for growth in future years. 2. A steady decline of inflation rates in the previous 4 years. And 3. A consistent decline in the overall unemployment rate. Madam Speaker, after the annual report was drafted, the Economics and Statistics Office revised its estimates of some of the statistics shown on page 47. As an example, real GDP growth forecasted for the year 2016 has been revised upwards to 3%, 3.0%, Madam Speaker, as opposed to the 2.1% shown on page 47. With respect to the audited financial statements, the audited financial statements of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development for the financial year ended 30th June 2016 shows that the Ministry ended the year with total assets of $20.6 million, total liabilities of $6.2 million, a net worth of $14.4 million, and cash equivalents of $11.4 million. During the 2015-16 fiscal year, the Ministry earned $22.4 million in operating revenue. And in the Cayman Islands government, there are two revenue classifications: entity revenue and executive revenue. Entity revenue refers to income earned by a ministry, portfolio, or office from the production of outputs, most of which are purchased by Cabinet, and revenue from the sale of goods and services to non-governmental agencies. Executive revenue, Madam Speaker, refers to revenues collected by the government under its coercive powers, authorized under various laws passed by this Legislative Assembly over time. An example of that being import duties, work permit fees, bank license fees, etc., and for which there is no direct exchange of goods or services. Executive revenue is accounted for in the consolidated financial statements of the government and not in the financial statements of individual ministries, portfolios, and offices. The ministry's financial statements reflect the results of the operations of its departments. The ministry's revenue consists mainly of entity revenue, which originates from the production of outputs to cabinet. Two of its departments, Customs and Treasury, collect executive revenue, which is not shown in the ministry's financial statements because executive revenue, as stated earlier, is accounted for in the consolidated financial statements of the government. Madam Speaker, during the year, the ministry incurred $18.9 million in operating expenses. There was a resulting operating surplus of $3.5 million for the year ended 30th of June 2016. The Auditor General completed the audit and issued an unqualified or clean opinion on the financial statements for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development for the financial year that ended 30th of June 2016. This is the second consecutive year that the ministry has received an unqualified opinion on its financial statements. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions to honourable ministers and members of the cabinet. The elected member for Northside to ask the honourable Minister of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Question number 33.
Recognize Honourable Deputy Premier to move the suspension of Standing Order 23.7 and 8.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 23.7 and 8 in order for questions to be asked after 11 o'clock.
The question is that Standing Order 23.7 and 8 be suspended to allow question times to commence and continue after the hour of 11 a.m. All those in favor, please say aye. Against, no. I believe the ayes have it. Standing Order 23.7 and 8 has been suspended. Madam Clerk. Honourable member from Northside, I'm not sure whether the chair, you have indicated to the chair that you've exercised your option to forgo your question or whether you still want to ask your question.
Madam Speaker, with respect, the vote that was just taken in this House had nothing to do with my questions. It had to do with suspending standing orders. If the Parliament had started on time, there would be no need to suspend standing orders, and I am going to continue to vote against the suspension of standing orders in this country when we start late.
I just felt it was necessary for you to make the clarification so that it would be understood by all. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to ask the Honourable Minister of Planning, Lands, Agricultural, Housing and Infrastructure the following question. Can the Honourable Minister give an update on the repairs to the Cayman Public Beach?
Recognize Honourable Minister for Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, unfortunately, I'm not allowed the luxury of voting no against dealing with these matters because it is a responsibility of mine. Madam Speaker, the answer. I can confirm that the Public Works Department is actively investigating a solution to the issue. And that issue, Madam Speaker, being the continued erosion of the beach at the Cayman Public Beach, I believe in the northern and eastern sections of the beach. The Public Works Department undertook a site visit with the member from Northside and certainly is looking at his suggestion, which is to use 4 by 2 by 2 feet interlocking concrete blocks to create a spit, as it were, in essence, Madam Speaker, a retaining wall, and to then backfill it with excess sand from the launching ramp area, which is continually created because of the currents flowing in that direction. However, Madam Speaker, the Public Works Department have recommended hiring engineers with experience in this field to advise them as to how best to place these blocks. The blocks could be one option, but there are other wall methods such as sheet piling, and they will be reviewing the various possible methodologies to determine best value and or construction cost of any retaining wall. And this would certainly need to be designed by qualified engineers because, if I may interject, Madam Speaker, even when the member and I talked about it, I believe that we both agree on what we really think should be done. But I think we also both agree that perhaps best to allow engineers to have a real good look at it to ensure that what we really think is the best thing, or if not, what the other suggestions are. We believe that we would also need to apply for the relevant approvals for this project. So the Public Works Department have been tasked with this undertaking, and we anticipate some few weeks before we can begin the project once we get all of the ducks lined up.
If there are no supplementaries, we'll move on to the next question.
The elected member for East End to ask the Honourable Minister of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment, question number 34.
Recognize the elected member from the District of East End.
Madam Speaker, on the procedural matter, I wish to ask, why is this question down to be answered by the Minister for Financial Services, Commerce, and Environment? Has there been a change in who is responsible for drafting legislation in the country?
Honourable member from Easton, normally procedural questions are dealt with by the chair. In this instance, I'll have to refer to either the Honourable Minister for Financial Services or the Honourable Attorney General, as I have no idea whatsoever.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. By way of clarification, the only reason why that has been the case, Madam Speaker, as you will see from the debate that has transpired so far, the Ministry of Financial Services, the Honourable Minister, has conducted the bill.
Madam Speaker.
Member from Easton.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, am I to believe then that here a bill that is presented to this House by the various ministers, they each individually and separately have drafted those, had responsibility for the drafting of those bills?
Your question is directed to,
To the chair, Madam Speaker.
again, the chair would not have knowledge of this, so I'll have to rely on those who have knowledge. And I would ask a representative from the government bench to respond if they're in a position to do it. Honorable Premier, thanks for coming to the aid.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not sure what the purpose of all of this is. But if I could refer the honourable member to the Constitution, and I hope I don't have to go to the specific sections, but the assignment of responsibility for the various roles in the cabinet are a matter for myself and the governor. As to who deals with bills in this House or who deals with questions in the House, that again is a matter for me as the elected leader of the cabinet. I should explain that this legal practitioner's bill is by no means the first bill that has been drafted by someone other than someone from the government legal drafting department. Not just in the case of this administration, but in previous administrations, including an administration in which the member from East End was a member. So none of this is new or surprising. The government in consultation, the elected government in consultation with the Honorable Attorney General, took a decision some 2 years ago that the outsourcing of this particular bill was necessary because the legal department was under and continues to be under immense pressure to produce bills. This was a piece of specialist legislation, and it was felt that if we were going to get it done and get it here in time, that is before the end of this term, it would require a dedicated legal draftsman to deal with the matter. Madam Speaker, even with all of that, we are here very much at the 11th hour trying to get the bill dealt with. Had we not adopted that approach, the bill would never have reached this far. I hope that is helpful to the member, to the House, and to those who may be listening, Madam Speaker, and to yourself.
Member from East End, please proceed with your question.
Madam Speaker, certainly I would crave your indulgence to respond to what the Premier has said, because prior to doing that, Madam Speaker, as a member of this Parliament, my understanding is that those assignments of duties, as the Premier just eloquently explained, comes through by way of instrument from the governor. And as I understand it, I understood it, the Attorney General was responsible for drafting. And yes, Madam Speaker, in accordance with those instruments, Madam Speaker, the Attorney General came here during Finance Committee and explained to myself and this House that he was outsourcing the drafting of the legislation. And yes, I agree, even during my time, those practices were in place. However, it was endorsed and managed by the Attorney General because the Attorney General has constitutional responsibility by virtue of an instrument assigning such. Now, Madam Speaker, in keeping with my knowledge, I submitted this question on the 19th of September 2016 to the Attorney General. It was transmitted to the executive to ask the Attorney General. And I have proof of it, Madam Speaker. Here we are this morning on the order paper with a different minister answering this question. Madam Speaker, certainly I contend that it's not the place of a minister who has no instrument assignment for the drafting of laws to be answering this question.
Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I've explained, and I refer the member again to Section 54 of the Constitution. The responsibility for assignment of responsibilities to ministers is a matter for myself and for the governor. If the member wants the question answered, the minister that has been charged with the responsibility for the conduct of this bill is prepared to answer it. If he does not, Madam Speaker, I invite you to move on to another item of business.
No, you can't invite nobody here. You can
Member
invite,
from Easton.
yeah, like
Please
how you
keep the
invited
comments
us, I
to
can
the
straighten
chair
that
on
out.
members.
Madam Speaker, in so doing, then, may we see the instrument in accordance with Section 54?
The chair, as the member from Easton would know, is not in possession of any instruments. Neither did I request any instruments. I'm just following what the order paper said. I take your point that it was submitted. I would ask you at this time to ask your question. I would ask the government that the request be made in the supplying of the instruments before the close of the business day.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope they don't go up there and make it now. Madam Speaker, question 34. In my name, cannot minister say what was the cost of outsourcing the drafting of the legal practitioner's bill and by whom was it drafted?
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the answer. The legal practitioner's bill was prepared in a two-stage process. The preliminary draft was prepared by a draftsperson formerly employed by the government, Mr. Clive Barrowman, in accordance with drafting instructions approved by the Cabinet, but commissioned jointly between the Cayman Islands Law Society and the Cayman Bar Association. Accordingly, there was no cost to the government for this work. Consistent with other cases where an external consultant has been engaged, on completion of the preliminary draft, this was given to the Legislative Drafting Department to ensure consistency with current Cayman jurisprudence and the formatting standard used by the government. Therefore, the bill and subsequent committee stage amendments have all been finalized by a government draftsperson. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any supplementaries? The member from Easton, followed by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I am surely stumped. I don't know where to go. Madam Speaker, when is it that someone in the private sector, when did government change the process for drafting whereby outsourcing is for free? Outsourcing of drafting is for free.
Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, I have certainly, I have heard of other instances in which legislation has been drafted at no cost at no cost, Madam Speaker. And I have had an indication that certainly some members are aware of other similar scenarios. Madam Speaker, as the Minister for Financial Services, similar discussions have been had in the past with Cayman Finance, for example, where it was very clear that there was a tremendous amount of work to be done on the agenda to bring the needed work, the essential work for the drafting of legislation in line with the objectives of, for example, the Financial Services Legislative Committee, as well as the Ministry of Financial Services. So there were certainly discussions, and there was an offer at that time for example, even Cayman Finance to pay for the cost of a draft person, but also to pay in terms of, or to assist financially in terms of the drafting of legislation by individuals who are familiar with the drafting procedures and the laws of the Cayman Islands, as in this case, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the member from Easton.
Madam Speaker, I don't know who else in this chamber is aware of other legislation being drafted for free, but I know I'm not. Maybe they kept them secret from me too, amongst other things, when I was there. Madam Speaker, I wonder if the minister is prepared to say whether he views the government getting free drafting from the two societies, organizations in Cayman as a conflict.
Honourable Minister, that's a matter of personal opinion. If you wish to answer, you may so do. If not, member from Easton, can you rephrase?
Madam Speaker, well, I don't know if that's a matter of opinion, but as you have said, but Madam Speaker, certainly this government, this minister, all of us, have been working on this for 15 years, as we have said. Would it not be in the interest of government to draft their own legislation as opposed to getting the two associations to draft this legislation? And if that's not a conflict, to pay for it? Madam Speaker, there's no way it might be free to government, but it wasn't free to them. I am absolutely sure of that, or belief that it wasn't free to them. So there has to be some degree of conflict connected in there.
Honourable Minister for Financial Services, if you could answer the first part of the question. The part relating to conflict, the member from Easton has stated that there's obviously a conflict, so unless you wish to dispute that, you're not required to answer that because you want to ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Do you need him to repeat it?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, just the first part.
Member from Easton, would you oblige the Honourable Minister and repeat your question?
Madam Speaker, I was asking if it was not a conflict for the very people who is going to benefit from this law. And we have been in discussions surrounding this law for the last 15 years, according to everybody. is that not a conflict? The very people who have been involved in it and advocating for a particular process, a particular law.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me be very clear. I started in response by saying that there was drafting instructions which Cabinet accepted as the proper basis upon which to have this legislation drafted by this individual who was a former employee of the Legislative Drafting Department of Government. Madam Speaker, there was a presentation, I think at least on 2 occasions in 2014 and 2015 on the joint position paper, which was agreed by the Caymanian Bar Association on the one hand and the Cayman Islands Law Society on the other hand. Madam Speaker, there was at least 3 points of principle that were added to that joint position paper by Cabinet. And that position paper, as amended by Cabinet, formed the clear basis for the drafting instructions that went to Mr. Barman as the experienced legal draftsperson, Madam Speaker. So I hear the member saying that the Caymania Bar Association and the Cayman Islands Law Society drafted the law. That is not correct, Madam Speaker. That is a complete misrepresentation. There were clear drafting instructions agreed by Cabinet. Those drafting instructions were followed by the draftsperson. And we have the bill which was finally signed off by the Government Legal Drafting Department and published in this and presented in this table in this House, Madam Speaker. So there's absolutely no drafting by any association. This was based strictly on the drafting instructions approved by Cabinet. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Easton, I allow 2 more, then I'll recognize the member, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, maybe the Minister don't understand that these stupid questions brings out the best in you. Madam Speaker, can the Minister say then who paid Mr. Barrowman since he was instructed the preliminary draft was prepared by a draft person formerly employed by the government, Mr. Clive Barrowman, in accordance with the draft instructions approved by Cabinet, but commissioned jointly by the Cayman Islands Law Society and the Cayman Bar Society. Accordingly, there was no cost to the government for this work. Who paid Mr. Clive Barrowman?
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, I am no more able to confirm who specifically paid Mr. Barrowman than I am able to confirm who, for example, paid, if any or if at all, some of the attorneys of record who were working with the previous government in drafting a legal practitioner's bill. I don't know, Madam Speaker. All I can say is that this work did not cost the government any money. I assume that it was a joint enterprise between the Law Society and the Caymania Bar Association in terms of having Mr. Barrowman prepare a draft in accordance with the approved drafting instructions from Cabinet. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, are you in a position to say whether or not Mr. Clive Barrowman received consideration at all?
I assume so, Madam Speaker, but I do not have any such details.
Member from Easton, your
Thank you.
final supplementary.
I'll get in with this one. I'll get what I need with this one. Madam Speaker, is the minister telling us that he assumed he got paid for government work after he was engaged by government, and the executive of this country does not know how government work was, one, paid for, and two, conducted? That is work to be brought to this legislature? Is that his answer?
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, I think I've been clear. The drafting instructions were provided to Mr. Barrowman, and there was an understanding that the Bar Association and the Law Society would make the arrangements, if any, with Mr. Barrowman. I do not have details around that, Madam Speaker, but I can say that the bill was prepared in accordance with the drafting instructions, and it was presented and reviewed by the Government Legal Drafting Department and ultimately signed off for presentation in this House, Madam Speaker.
Recognize Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, will the minister lay a copy of the drafting instructions on the table? One, if you don't want to do that, I'd certainly like to have a copy of it. Two, can the minister say how many amendments is the government putting forward to this bill as of now, his knowledge?
Honorable
Madam
Minister.
Speaker, we haven't had any copies of any amendments.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, I'm certainly happy to table a copy of the agreed joint position paper between the Cayman Bar Association and the Cayman Islands Law Society as modified by government. I don't have a copy of it available immediately, but I'm certainly happy to table that later
Minister,
today.
I think, was that what you were asking for? I thought you asked for... Can the chair just have some attention, please? I thought the Honourable Leader of the Opposition asked for the drafting instructions to be tabled as opposed to the position paper if they're not one and the same, just to make sure that the chair understood it correctly. Is that your position? Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, as I've indicated, the joint position paper, as amended by government, formed the basis of the drafting instructions approved by Cabinet. So I am, as I've indicated, I'm happy to table that later today. And in terms of, I think his additional question was amendments. We've certainly filed amendments, but I understand they have not yet been circulated. How many? I don't know the exact number. I certainly heard the member indicate previously it was 60. I think it's somewhere around 40.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thought at one point he said it was 63, but let's wait. Yes, let's wait to see. I guess they soon come to us. In any event, Madam Speaker, I just want to make absolutely clear whether there's two different things: the position of the two legal entities, associations, and the drafting instructions for Cabinet. If there's a difference, I want to make sure that I get, now that he said that, I want all two.
Honorable Minister of Financial Services, can you just clarify for the Honorable Leader of the Opposition?
Madam Speaker, I'm a little confused by his distinction. I think I've been quite...
Order.
I think I've been quite clear, thank you, Madam Speaker, that the position paper, the joint position paper between the two representative bodies, one being the Cayman Islands Law Society, the other being the Caymanian Bar Association, as modified by Cabinet, form the basis for the drafting instructions.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, supplementary.
Madam Speaker, he's absolutely clear what he's saying. What I'm not clear of whether it's two different things. And he's not said that. Are there two separate, is there drafting instructions? And one, that's one. Two, the positions as taken by the two associations. It's two separate things. Now, there's two separate things, because while you were answering, Madam Speaker, the Premier is telling me I am not getting those drafting instructions. What are you saying? I want, Madam Speaker, I am requesting of the government their drafting instructions. Yeah. Your drafting, I'm not asking the Cabinet paper, however you give it to me, as long as what you've given me is what you've done in Cabinet, because that was where the drafting instruction would have had to come. Right. So that's what I'm asking for. All right, but we were saying no for then.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I can only speak to my experience, which admittedly has not been of the length of the Leader of the Opposition. But certainly, drafting instructions vary, Madam Speaker. I have seen drafting instructions where somebody has actually prepared something that looks virtually like the amendment, if it's an amendment, or if it looks like a standalone bill. And that is then accepted as the basis for drafting instructions. In this case, Madam Speaker, we accepted the joint position paper as modified by Cabinet as the drafting instructions. So that is what I am proposing to the table for the benefit of the membership, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
So, Madam Speaker, let's get this clear then. The two legal associations proposed positions, sent them to Cabinet, and Cabinet then accepted or amended or whatever those positions as drafting instructions.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, it is correct that the joint position paper between the Bar Association and the Law Society set out a broad range of principles which were relevant to the issues around the legal practitioners law going back for many years. And this position paper represented what was described as a sea change in approach between the two associations, where they finally agreed on the important issues that needed to be reflected in the bill, Madam Speaker. And this formed the basis of the drafting instructions, Madam Speaker. I have seen similar approaches being taken, Madam Speaker. As I have said, in my admittedly short experience with government, I have seen a variety of approaches being taken to form the basis of drafting instructions. The member, the Leader of the Opposition, is indicating that he knows that and he understands and he's familiar with that approach. So the fact that we are talking about a joint position paper as amended by government, as forming or being the drafting instructions, that is not unusual. that is not improper in any way, and it certainly has much precedent from what I have observed, Madam Speaker, in the drafting approach to legislation. Thank you.
Madam,
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, allow 2 more supplementaries.
Madam Speaker, I am not arguing the point about the propriety of what they did. What I want to find out is what they agreed on that was given to them, and that then was given back to the to associations, and that on those instructions is what the bill or how the bill was done. That's what I want to confirm. Madam Speaker, I've been in and out of the cabinet many times, several times, and for instance, the mutual funds bill, the one that brought mutual funds in here to this country, was done by Tony Travers and given to government. Government then amended it the way they wanted.
Member from, just a minute, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, were you expecting a response or a confirmation on that?
I just want to assure the minister I'm not accusing him of anything. I just want to try to find out whether there is a difference, whether they produce a paper, that paper was taken to cabinet and then sent to those 2 associations, or it originated with the 2 associations, came to them, they've done what they had to do with it and sent it back to them and said, give us a bill.
Honourable members, sorry, you finished, sir?
I don't know whether he addressed the matter of cost. I thought he said he didn't know what the amount was paid to Mr. Borrowman. But that government did not pay. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Honourable members, I believe that we can cut down the time for supplementaries on this if we took the luncheon break and if the House was provided with a copy of the drafting instructions after lunch. We'll break now and come back.
Madam Speaker,
Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, just to complete the point about who's responsible for what on this side, I just refer you, Madam Speaker, to Section 56 of the Constitution dealing with the Attorney General. 56.1, there shall be an Attorney General of the Cayman Islands whose office shall be a public office and who shall be appointed in accordance with Section 106. 56.2, the Attorney General shall be the principal legal advisor to the government and the Legislative Assembly. That's the extent that the Constitution deals with the role of the Attorney General.
We'll take the luncheon break and reconvene at 2 p.m.